Hey, ihr lieben Menschen da draußen, ich wünsche euch erstmal einen wunderschönen Tag. Dies ist eine kurze Intro zu meinem neuen Interview mit Said Elias Dawlabani. Ich werde jetzt in der kommenden Zeit wieder mehr Interviews mit bemerkenswerten Menschen durchführen. Ich hoffe, das trifft auf euer Interesse und ich möchte euch von Herzen einladen, wenn es jemanden gibt, von dem ihr denkt, ich sollte ihn unbedingt in meinem Podcast einladen, könnt ihr das sehr, sehr gern hier unten in den Kommentaren hinterlassen. Heute geht es um ein spannendes Thema. Es geht um die Ebenen des Bewusstseins und es geht um eine Entwicklungsstufe, die viele Visionäre und Visionärinnen in den 70er Jahren vorausgesagt haben, der sogenannte Second Sapiens, eine völlig neue Art, die Komplexität des Lebens zu begreifen und als Mensch demütig und sehr bewusst unseren Platz in der Komplexität im Gewebe des Lebens einzunehmen. Ich möchte heute zum allerersten Mal eine Triggerwarnung aussprechen. Said ist jemand, der sich sehr ausführlich mit Spiral Dynamics, mit den Entwicklungsebenen der Menschheit und auch mit der Entwicklung unseres Klimas beschäftigt. Und ich weiß nicht, ob du die Nachrichten, was unser Wetter, was Mutter Gaia betrifft, an dich herankommen lässt. Fakt ist, diese Nachrichten sind schlecht. Und ich verstehe, dass manche Menschen heutzutage sagen, okay, ich bin eh schon am Rande meiner Aufnahmekapazität, ich kann keine schlechten Nachrichten mehr verkraften. Ich möchte dich darauf hinweisen, dass es in diesem Podcast auch Nachrichten gibt über mögliche Zukunftstrends oder auch über den aktuellen Zustand der Erde, die negativ sind. Ich persönlich bin der Meinung, es ist wichtig, dass wir das wissen. Es ist wichtig, dass wir uns davon berühren lassen und dann eine innere Haltung von, ich nenne das Zukunftslust entwickeln, eine Bereitschaft wirklich gerade jetzt in dieser besonderen, heiklen Zeit der Menschheitsgeschichte alles, was du bist, was du weißt, was du hast, in die Waagschale zu werfen. Und ich möchte dich einladen, erwachsen und selbstverantwortlich eine Wahl zu treffen, ob du dich in diesem Podcast damit konfrontieren möchtest. Ich möchte euch von Herzen einladen, euch das Buch von Said zu besorgen, Second Sapiens. Für mich persönlich ist es ein ganz, ganz wichtiges Buch, ein unbequemes Buch und gleichzeitig ein Buch, was mobilisiert und was auch erklärt, warum wir stehen, wo wir stehen und wohin wir uns entwickeln müssen. Wie immer freue ich mich nach dem Podcast über eure Kommentare im Postbereich. Was war deine wichtigste Erkenntnis? Was hat dich berührt? Was nimmst du mit? Ich freue mich, wenn du den Podcast teilst. Es finde ich persönlich ein ganz, ganz wichtiges Thema. Und wenn du es noch nicht gemacht hast, abonniere den Kanal. Das hilft immer bei den Algorithmen. Ich danke dir sehr, dass du dabei bist. Ich danke dir sehr, dass du dich den existenziellen Fragen der Menschheit stellst.
Dear Said, first I have to thank you very much that you were able to so quickly respond to my request. I'm very happy to meet you.
Likewise, Veit, it's a pleasure to meet you as well.
So my getting to know point with you is, of course, your new book, Second Sapiens, and we will speak about this. But first, I would like to ask you to give our audience a little bit insight about your background and yourself as a person.
Yes. Thank you for the opportunity to do this. Before coming into the work that Don Beck was doing, I had a career in real estate. I was building homes and commercial properties and, being an investment advisor. And then around 2002, Don asked my late wife, Elsa, if she consider helping him in bringing the spiral dynamics framework to the Arab-Israeli conflict. And she had already been trained with Don, and he saw how well she knew the political system. She's she's an attorney. She went to law school in Lebanon, so she studied, among other things, Sharia law, and of course, Lebanon having a French system, also understood the Napoleon Code and Commonwealth law and so forth. So she was aware of the comparative differences between the different cultures, between the different laws that needed to be applied. So Dr. Beck found that as a very important thing for him to be able to do his work. So you fast forward a few years, and I found myself being a lot more involved in the work that they were doing. And then in about 2004, the three of us formed the Center for Human Emergence, Middle East, through which we did our work for several years. So this now becomes the application of spiral dynamics at the large scale. This is really, most people who take spiral dynamics or spiral dynamics integral use it for the, Don rates the degrees of complexity in the size of the application that you're applying the framework to. And so 95% of people who get certified in spiral dynamics or spiral dynamics integral or integral theory itself really deal with the issues of personal growth, personal consciousness, corporate consulting, group dynamics and things of that nature. Those are levels 1 and 2 on the complexity scale. And so what we were doing in Israel and Palestine was more at the level of complexity 3, 4, and 5. So we're talking about a country, a region, and possibly the dynamics, the outer dynamics that would affect geopolitics overall. So that's really one of the first distinctions I want to bring up in this work. Then at about 2006 or so, having had the background in finance and economics, I began to write some articles about the economic problems we were having with the housing crisis here in the United States. And I was doing that through the spiral dynamics framework. And I found a lot of people responding to that. Like we never considered that, economics or anything that has to do with the economy can be placed in an evolutionary form. And so that, as the financial crisis of 2008 set on, I shifted the focus to addressing really the greater global financial crisis. And from that, Dr. Beck basically told me, unless you're building homes and making a loss, you should drop everything you're doing and write a book about this. And so, but by that, by 2013, I had written my first book, Memenomics, and it seemed quite a bit of success. But then at around 2015 or so, Dr. Beck and I started having this casual conversation about whether or not either spiral dynamics or integral theory are sufficient, are models that are sufficient enough to address the existential problems that we were facing. Primarily all the volatility and the chaos that we being created by the digital age. Add to that the idea that politicians who run the world really don't know how to deal with this huge disruption. And of course, the largest disruption overall was climate change. And so we began this conversation about that. And every time we talked about it, Dr. Beck would tell me, Saeed, you're not zooming out far enough. So what he was basically referring to is that if I was looking at this from a perspective of, level 4 or 5 of complexity, I really needed to zoom out to level 6 and beyond, look at this from a planetary perspective. And so, through the years, I've started listening to podcasts about climate change, to people who really know the causes of climate change, and almost every time they would end their conversations with something along the lines of human intelligence could never be as complex as Mother Nature's intelligence. And so it was me that clicked. And I go, okay, well, this is how we transition the model to address issues of climate change. This is how we move the model to the future. And it has to move from this idea that, one of the scientists called the human exceptionalism paradigm. We have to move from this idea that, if we think about a problem with the predominant form of science and research, that we can solve it. When in reality, we really needed almost a return to nature. It's almost like skipping the entire Enlightenment era, take its best practices and return it back to how we were before the orange stages of development came about, to how life was, when we were all, indigenous intelligence groups, tens of thousands of us populated the world, where we really still believed in the spirituality of Mother Nature, what it is like to be in touch with the ground, with the cosmos, and really the mystery that the orange stage just completely dismisses in favor of reductionist science, in favor of analysis that keeps happening and provides us with solutions that we don't know if they're right or not. So that really led me to start the research on this, and that's how I found the idea of what Don calls the repurposing of second-tier intelligence. So in reality, what I've done in my work, Fight, is take the second tier, which, when Don and Ken created, they created in an environment where climate change wasn't an issue. It wasn't on the horizon for them. So the models defaulted to addressing human-built structures. And so what Don supported is in the idea that second tier needs to be purposed is that, human intelligence needs to be nested in natural intelligence again. Yeah. And so that's the huge distinction that I make in my book, is that we should stop looking for human exceptionalism and our idea that we can analyze everything down to the micro detail and derive solutions from that, to the idea that we should really listen to what Mother Nature is telling us and how she reacts to things and how she adapts to things, and incorporate that into new scientific methods. So this is what I'm calling the anthropogenic Gaian sciences, which are at the turquoise level. When you nest the model in natural intelligence, before even that, Don considered the turquoise stage as the theme of it was the ecological alignment of all living things on Earth. Okay? So, we're talking about an ecological crisis here. So why wouldn't that be the purpose of the turquoise system empowered by ecological sciences? Yeah. So that's really the foundation from where I approached my book.
Yeah. So there's I have to admit, your book has given me some sleepless nights. It's not a nice book. Yeah. I think it's a very, very important, it's a brave book. Yeah. Because it puts the finger in the wound. So I have a challenge for you. So in my audience, I would say we have 10 to 20% of people which are very familiar with spiral dynamics and so on. Mm-hmm. The other part of the audience is very open, very, very curious, but they don't know what is the first tier, the second tier. So in your book, you write a lot about the first sapiens and the second sapiens. So how you would describe this very different kind of sapiens to somebody who never heard anything about spiral dynamics?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So basically, the theory of spiral dynamics goes all the way back to the original researcher who conceived it, a professor, developmental psychology professor by the name of Claire Graves. And through his research, he had uncovered that human evolution develops in stages, and that and he uncovered a total of 8 stages, based on his research back in the 1960s and 70s. And he figured the first 6 stages of development are what he called the first expression of an endless symphony of humanity. So the first expression being really driven by deficient motivations, by, for example, if you live in a tribal culture, you live in the fear of the enemy. That's stage number 2. If you're like so many autocratic politicians that are rising to power, if you believe in your own ego and your own personal power as the solution to everything, you're at stage 3. If you believe in institutions and the idea that there is things like, life after death, there's a need to postpone gratification for rewards later, that's level 4. Level 4, when you apply it to the macro stage, that's really where democracy begins. That's where the shift from, believing in the power of the ego to nesting power in the hands of the institutions of a culture. So democracy begins at that stage. So beyond that, stage where there's absolutism. There's, religion, for example, is the entry stages of that fourth stage of development, and believes in absolute. It's either black or white. It's right or wrong. And because of that, people with higher intelligence begin to reject that model, and they ascend to the next level. So level 5 in the model was born with the Age of Enlightenment, with the scientific revolution, where we begin to think in multiplistic scientific ways. The general theme of that stage of development is to uncover the secrets of the universe through scientific research and mathematical analysis and modeling. And so, and it is also that stage. So every stage has a good expression and a bad expression. What we're seeing now is the bad expression of that fifth level of development. It has gotten us to where we are. It has used what is called the reductive sciences to promote the idea that we can consume forever. That if we create a peaceful society through trade and consumption, that we will never have war again. Well, that fallacy is beginning to show now. Great, we haven't started another great war against each other, but we collectively started the war against Mother Nature. And so this is the nature of the fifth stage of development that is responsible for most of the problems now. Now, the stage above that is stage 6, which believes in the humanitarian nature where we are, in the egalitarian values, in community values, in treating each other with respect and equal, and the idea that someone is better than the other is a fallacy. Where within that stage, although it's very harmonious and very good, and it's something that we really need to emerge to before we move further up to higher stages, the very idea that you can treat someone like Donald Trump or someone like Putin as someone who's equal is a fallacy. The minute you start treating them like that, they will take advantage of you and will destroy the entire developmental hierarchy that got you there. And so that's why that sixth stage, the green system, the egalitarian system, has been ineffective in addressing ecological problems with geopolitics, issues with peace. Peace happens by design, and you have to understand all those stages that are below that sixth stage in order for peace to be effective.
Yeah.
And so, to do that, you can't do it from a sixth stage. You have to go to what's called as second tier. So what Dr. Graves has uncovered is that.
So this is the first tier, right?
Yeah. So the first tier ends at level 6, and Dr. Graves says that is quite a dangerous stage to be stuck in. Simply because of the idea that we think that, we're all equal, this is the best humanity is going to be. And we as Dr. Beck used to label it, we will throw the ladder out from under us, the ladder that got us there. Oh no, there's nothing else that exists. Oh no, yeah, you're a bloodthirsty dictator. Oh no, come on. If we give you a chance to sit in a circle with us and we hold hands, everything's going to be okay. That's BS. That's, they look for that opportunity to destroy the complexity that has been built. So, Dr. Graves uses this expression, says, when you're at stage 6, you're really the only thing that moves you because you've thrown that ladder that got you there from under. The only thing that moves you to realize there are higher stages of existence is that when you're sitting in a meditative state, staring at your navel and using daddy's gold credit card, suddenly the ceiling begins to collapse on your head.
Yeah.
And what he's saying is the ceiling is an indication of the problems that begin to appear that need higher intelligence to be solved. And so the ceiling collapsing on your head is what's happening now. The idea that we have ignored ecological issues is that ceiling falling in on our heads. And so we're in this deep and profound search for new ways on how to not only fix the ceiling, but how do we preserve it for the rest of humanity that, that we can postpone that issue as long as possible. And so this is the difference between first tier and second tier. Second tier is made up of two additional value systems. Level 7, which is labeled the integrative level or color yellow. I labeled it in my work, Sapiens 2.1. And it is really that transitional stage between the first and the second tier. It finds what went wrong in the first tier, where we are stuck, where do the barriers exist that stop us from addressing certain issues, and it opens them up. It really plugs them on a trajectory towards a healthy second tier view of a better picture of that stage and a better picture of ourselves. And then comes in the eighth stage that says, well, okay, now that we're aligned, I am the long-term caregiver for this humanity that are going to accommodate humanity to live in an ecologically aligned, in a thriving way as much as we can. So primarily, those are the two differences between what I call first sapiens, people who are motivated by deficient needs, to second sapiens, people who use full brain capacities, but nest those capacities in the intelligence of Mother Nature, in the intelligence that predates human intelligence by 3.4 billion years. Mm-hmm. And that's the nature of what we're trying to describe here, and it is complex. And like you said, it's not for the weak of heart.
Mm-hmm. So I work a lot for people which are in green, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and usually if I talk about turquoise and I explain it a little bit, a lot of people which are in green think, "Oh, that's me." That's me. So what is the main difference? So how can I find out for myself, if I'm honest, if I'm self-honest, that there's still a gap?
I can only speak about my experience. Yeah. Most people in green who I ran into belong in the unhealthy aspect of green. Mm-hmm. To really become, to have a healthy first tier, meaning that you can transition to second tier, to second sapient thinking without really too much problems. All the entire systems below you have to be in a healthy stage. Now, what that means is you really have to understand the motivations of the lower systems. There isn't a single green person that I met who understands how the orange system, the capitalist system that runs the world, especially here in the States, they have absolutely no clue how it runs. They're very angry at it. They understand it marginally, but that is not enough. You really have to dig deep into understanding the mechanics of what makes the systems below you tick. And unless you're able to address these effectively and really test to see if your hypothesis is effective, you just won't be able to ascend to the second tier of intelligence. The primary example I use in politics here in the States, we have one senator by the name of Elizabeth Warren, who is really a second tier thinker. She was a healthy Republican, realized in the orange stages of development in capitalism at its best, but she saw it erode over the years. So she's able to understand where things went wrong. She was able to understand for example, how the banking industry got deregulated, which is at the heart of the causes of the financial crisis, and the political players who did that. She was also to see how weak the regulatory element was. So we're talking now about her diagnosing what was wrong with the fourth stage of development, what was wrong with the fifth stage of development, okay? And also, if you've heard what she had said about leaders like Donald Trump and Putin, you get a clear understanding that she also understands how the third stage of development functions. So unless a person understands the function and the dysfunction, the healthy and the unhealthy aspect of the systems below them, they won't be able to ascend to second tier intelligence. Right. So when green tells you, now that's turquoise, that's projection. That's pure projection. Simply ask them, why do you think so? And if it's look for phrasing that is mostly green more than it is turquoise. Do you know not only, oh, I care for all of humanity, do you know how to care for all of humanity? Are you able to access the systems that are in place to change them to know how to care for humanity?
Yeah.
So it's more of a macro and a mega scale application, not, I really don't apply much of the spiritual aspects of spiral dynamics and Ken's teaching to second tier, simply because, the further you move away, the further you develop yourself spiritually and philosophically, the further you're moving away from real solutions. And so I really want to stick to, this is a scientifically based concept. And unless we understand that whatever we're doing now is going to fall short from addressing climate change, that is disasters in nature, the world's not going to have a chance to emerge to second tier. And so there are ways to measure whether someone's in turquoise or not. They could be wrongfully assimilating the values of turquoise. And so there are certain acid tests that you can do. Value match, if you know who they are, they can easily run a test. And even if someone who really knows how to manipulate the test, hawk at the value match can tell, who, just by, again, assessing what I just talked about. If they have a high rejection to the orange system in their psychological profile, that means they're green. They're not turquoise. If they have a high rejection to all the lower elements on the spiral, they just don't belong in second tier.
Yeah. So it means I have to find orange in myself. I have to find blue in myself. I have to make peace with this in myself. Yeah. In your book, you write with a strong urgency about this time, and you call it the Great Obsolescence. Could you please explain what we mean with this?
So, I want to go back to the discussions that Dr. Beck and I were having in 2015 and 2016. And so as I did my research into, how to repurpose the model, why weren't we really addressing the issues? I first wanted to identify what the issues were. And, with him telling me you need to stand on Jupiter and look at this from the outer holon that we're getting used to, what my research then covered is that there were three factors that are contributing to what I came to call the Great Obsolescence. Many people in the integral community call this the meta crisis. Well, the meta crisis has one thing in common, and it is the idea that the values that we embraced post-World War II are at the heart of what's happening now. The idea that we can, a model for governance can last forever, it's a big fallacy. The dynamics of the world has changed since the post-World War II framework that gave us reality the way it is. Population has grown by more than 3 times. We created global institution to accommodate modernity and development. But the size of the global economy has grown by 15 times since those times. So of course, the more complexity a system gains, the more complex solutions you have to find. So our institutions aren't moving as fast as the evolutionary trajectory, be it, the degree to which we conduct commerce, the degree to which so much of the world's population is emerging into that modernity phase, without really knowing the consequences of it. So the first major factor that was contributing to the Great Obsolescence was the idea that the values and the ethos that have driven us for the last 80 years or so have reached a decline stage. And the further they move without us changing the mechanics of how these institutions work, the further the randomness of these problems are going to show. So, and one of the equally important issues was our quick adoption of the digital age and how that came about. the whole digital age being accessible to you and me and every person on the street came about in the mid 1990s. And it was, the people who created the very first navigable and popular internet browser were well-meaning engineers at UC Berkeley, University of California in Berkeley. Well, if you know what Berkeley is, I mean, it's the hub of where the hippie movement was created in the States. So it's a very green environment. It's very anti-establishment development. And so you get Berkeley, San Francisco, and Silicon Valley that are in those green values, that are entrenched in those green values, and that reflects in the kind of work that they do. So when you're green and you feel that, everybody has to have access to knowledge and information and how to do things, to resources, you're beginning to level the asymmetries that existed in the silos that we have known for forever. Knowledge was contained in silos. I don't want, my local waiter operating on my brain. I mean, that's just, there are knowledge silos that determine how that person got it. And what the internet has done, it has leveled that playing field in an attempt to make everybody equal. So the idea of the second element of disruption is part and parcel goes back to the nature of the green system. When you ignore the differences of the people below green, you allow them to rise. And who takes advantage most of that situation? Of course, red does. The red system takes when all they want is the disappearance of rule. All they want is the disappearance of the blue system. So when you pacify the blue system and you do it ubiquitously through the spread of knowledge through the internet, suddenly red begins to rise, and suddenly red begins to shape how its people who sympathize with it receive information and knowledge. And so, to me, what's at the heart of the decline of liberal democracies around the world is this very idea that the knowledge that we have gotten used to receiving in the models that we created before the internet were the right way for us to keep values in an emergent way and not fall back to the dictatorships and the ages of empire that existed in the red system. When you remove that layer, you allow that red system to rise. And it can only do it through the existing institutions. So that's why people believe that Trump is an effective leader. That ecology of knowledge has been there for 30 years. And I mean, these are rational people that you talk to who support Trump. And they just simply believe that that's the truth. And
how do you explain this? How can somebody who is at his mind think Trump is a good leader?
Well, the people who think Trump is a good leader come from two camps. The first one primarily from the orange values, from the idea that, capitalism or free markets should continue the way they are forever. So that's where he gets most of his primary support is, that's who funds his campaigns, that Elon Musk, $200 million to help him get elected. So that infrastructure has been put in place to disrupt the blue system, the rule of law. That was put in place 40, 50 years ago, before the internet became a thing. So you have that pressure acting from the top. And then the other people who believe, so their purpose, if you're orange looking at Trump, their purpose is the only thing that matters to me is a completely deregulated economy where I can take advantage of everybody, where I can maximize my profit. And if it happens to hurt millions of people around the world, so be it. Okay. So that's perspective number one. Perspective number two are people who share his values from that red system. People who don't particularly like the way the law has treated them. They fail to assimilate into the blue system that has institutions. And suddenly they see a guy talking at their level, at the red level, and say, yeah, that's our leader. Yeah, great. So we will start believing in that. And when you have a media ecosystem that has been put in place for 30, 40 years, you don't have to go anywhere else this becomes like a normal thing. To listen to Fox News becomes a normal thing. To listen to right conspiracy theorists who rationalize their arguments through books that were published, through a radical or racist perspective on things. I cite many institutions in this country that have caused this. When you cite racist things and call them academic and have merit, it fulfills your curiosity to search anywhere else. And so it becomes a full landscape that you look at to get your information. And so this won't go away with Trump, not running, or it won't go away with electing another Democrat. That infrastructure has been placed permanently, and the only solution for it is for politicians to understand the depth to which the digital infrastructure has disrupted the old silos. None of them understand this. We don't receive our news from the 4 major national stations that existed 30 years ago that were all progressive in nature. We have a million information out. I mean, you and I are talking the way we're talking because of that disruption. We're able to meet on platforms because of that digital disruption. So
there's a good side of this and a bad side, right?
Right. Always the pair of opposites. Our enlightened mind by its nature dismisses the dark side. We always embrace the bright side because it makes us feel better, because it makes our bank account better. It makes more sense. And what happens is when we grow the dark side, it doesn't go away. It becomes a cumulative part of our shadow that sooner or later we have to face.
Yeah.
So that's this aspect number 2. And then, the aspect number 3 is the primary focus of the book, which is our inability to address climate change the way it should be addressed.
I have a question to you as a human being, because, I read your book and I really can feel, that you are deeply moved by what you're seeing, we are going with so much speed into a catastrophe. Yeah. So how do you cope this?
That's really a difficult question to answer. People cope in different ways. People manage to grieve in different ways. I've lost my soulmate and the love of my life just a few years ago. And, I grieved for what people would consider a far longer period than, loss of a person would be, because, it was, my wife Elsa, me, and Don Beck, who were going to redefine the world. And suddenly, I lose them within 2 years of each other. And so my own grieving process was deep and prolonged. But in that darkness, what Jung would say, I found the gold to find the answers on the things that were in me that I can use as tools to help me cope. The idea that, sooner or later we all have to face our own mortality. Sooner or later, whatever shadow is building will accumulate. And the sooner we begin to pop that bubble, the sooner we begin to feel better about ourselves. And if that means that, we're heading towards catastrophe, that's going to be our destiny. I don't want to say that in a cold way. The purpose of me writing the book is really to shift advocacy. To not just believe in what the politicians are telling us, not just to believe in what those, annual, meetings with the climate change sponsored by the UN. When the single biggest conference about climate change is sponsored by the state that produces the most, last year, It was sponsored by Dubai, by the UAE, one of the largest contributors to the carbon footprint. When that happens, there really isn't sincerity about addressing this. They're not getting their information from it where it needs to be, from what Mother Nature is telling us. So to me, what I've uncovered, Fight, is the idea that so many of the planetary systems have moved past their tipping points. The solace that I find in understanding those, what I call, the anthropogenic Gaian sciences, is the idea that, Mother Nature does not work on the same calendar as we do. Mother Nature is not worried about what the outcome of the next, corporate quarter is going to be, or what next year is going to be. She works on a geologic timetable. So, when I say collapse, it might not happen, in a few years. It might not happen for a few decades. But the idea that things related to climate change keep increasing in intensity is an early warning sign for me to say we have to change the way we advocate for change. And so, once you allow yourself to be in that darkness, you begin to see that gold in the shadow. So the advocacy shifts from, oh yeah, I support, green economy efforts. I support, regenerative agriculture and this and that. When in reality, a simple decision like the one that Donald Trump just made, withdraws from the Paris Climate Accords, has tremendous impact on what we're doing. So the advocacy become not to support these industries. The advocacy become replace our current leaders with leaders who know what climate change is all about. And so that's where I want the energy to be shifted towards focusing on what's really causing our disruption beyond what our leaders are telling us. Please tell me why the ice caps are melting so fast. The top scientists who specialize in that study don't know. If they don't know, how do you expect our politicians to know? I mean, there isn't a single politician in the United States, local, state or federal level, that really understands the complexity of that science. They barely understand how the digital world operates. Wow. So it's more of an advocacy, if that makes sense. It's more of an advocacy that'll bring us out of that idea that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. So there are a lot of, especially people from the younger generations, yes, which probably see it the same way like you. And I really can feel the pain and the frustration of these people and the feeling of, okay, we cannot wake up the other people. They're just sleeping. So what kind of advice do we have for these generations, which really probably agree with you totally?
I would ask them to develop rational arguments with their parents, with their teachers, with their communities on why they genuinely feel the way they do, why fear and dystopia preoccupies their views on what's happening. And I would advocate for them. Every time I say this at a speaking engagement, I get standing applause. I would, I tell the youth to stop going to school. I tell, convince your parents that, don't go to school. And when they ask you why, because I don't see a future. Why go to school when the planet is collapsing? You need to focus on these issues. I mean, talk about a survival model. I mean, this is what spiral dynamics is all about. You and I can't be having this discussion if we don't have shelter over our heads, if we don't have food to eat. So why would I want to go to school when the idea that, environmental changes are going to, make everything that your generation, the older generation, has taken for granted? So, I would say, quit school, go demonstrate, create advocacy in your local communities, just empower the idea that a lot more research needs to go into uncovering really what's happening with our climate change, because it's no longer the carbon footprint. We're talking about 9 different planetary systems, and climate change is only one of them. I mean, we're looking at last study going back to 2023 that 6 of the 9 systems have reached certain tipping points where the behavior becomes increasingly unpredictable, exponentially unpredictable. So that's what we're looking at. Now, exponentially unpredictable in geologic time could mean that we won't have a major disaster for another 50 years, maybe for another 100 years. And people would say, Saeed was wrong. I could very much be wrong. But I'm looking at the scientists who really study changes with the Earth systems from that stage of development, from the turquoise stage that tells us, in order for you to survive at this stage, wherever you are now, you need to really figure this out. It's like you're living in a home with so many rooms, and each debate that goes on in the world is taking place in one of those rooms. These are justifiable debates. Issues about, decline of democracy, issues about women's rights, issues about equality, issues about poverty. Those are all conversations that belong in every room of that big house. But that house is on fire. And so, what do we do? Okay, those are legitimate conversations to have. We need to get out of that house and focus our energy on how to put the fire out first.
Yeah.
And so this is the approach of my book, and this is the kind of research that I've done, that its intention is to really help people shift their focus to the far larger container that makes life possible.
In your book, you say we have to learn, we have to listen to the intelligence of Gaia. And you surely don't mean it like a green retro-romantic vision. So can you explain what do you mean with Gaia intelligent? And for example, how can I very concrete listen more to this kind of intelligent?
Yeah. So the nature of Gaian intelligence, the way I followed the trajectory of Graves' research into science, the main difference between that and all the sciences that we have now is that Gaia's intelligence is driven by what's called the complex adaptive systems of life. And the key element to that fight is the idea that Mother Nature, whether it's at the nano level, the micro level, the macro level, or the planetary level, okay, always gives us feedback loops. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. That's how Mother Nature works, And what we have done is we've ignored the negative aspect of these feedback loops. Because of our nature, we accepted the positive feedback loop and ignored the rest of it. So what I say is, before you embark on a business plan, before you embark on what you want to be in your next stage of development, look at what how Mother Nature gives feedback loops. If you don't water your flowers, they're going to die. Action, reaction. Okay? If you do this, this is going to happen. Don't ignore the subsequent result of your action. And so when you account for these feedback loops, you have a sense of things being more balanced. You're not driven by the idea that I want to be first. You're not driven by the idea that, a competitive need to be on the top of the evolutionary apex anymore. You come into a place where you live in this homeostasis existence like the rest of Mother Nature. You begin to realize, oh, wow, whatever I'm doing to drive to this place, it's, it is increasing the carbon footprint. And, although many people would dismiss it, I should be aware of that. Every little action, if you propose a business plan without looking at whether it's going to affect the ecological footprint, we're not talking about the carbon footprint anymore. We're talking about the ecological footprint, which is, the largest footprint. If you want to create a product, you have to start looking at the very extractive point from where you get the raw material for that and see if that's affecting that ecology. And then you study, how it's being manufactured, how it's being shipped, and how, the end user uses it and how they dispose of it. You have to study the ecological impact along every line. Okay? That is really being in touch with every feedback loop, because if we all do that, we will come to the awareness that we're not doing enough to address climate change. And then the serious conversation begins.
Mm-hmm. You speak in your book a lot about CAPI, C-A-P-I.
Yes.
So capacity of authority, power, and influence.
Yes. Yes.
So
the essence of authority, power, and influence.
yes. So if a normal person reads this, I can imagine this person thinks, okay, I'm not this. So the center of power is there, so they have to change it. They have to do it. So what kind of advice you can give people which feel very powerless in this time and think, I have no power, I have no influence?
Yeah. Well, as I say in my book, Fight, when Dr. Beck, Elza and I started our mission in Israel and Palestine, the first question we asked is, how much of the CAPI element do we hold? The coalescence of authority, power, and influence. And that grows in concentric circles as well. And what we uncovered is that we have very little CAPI. Among the people who know spiral dynamics and integral theory is the extent to which we can influence change. And so we began at the grassroots level to develop that to outer rings. Suddenly it wasn't just a specialized community anymore. We trained a greater circle in understanding the framework. We put them out to the community. We trained greater members of the community to understand the difference between, a traditional view in the modern lens, the traditional view on peace is, to how peace is a product of design if you use the spiral dynamics model. So we kept over a 5-year period, we kept increasing the size of CAPI, of who holds coalescence, authority, or power, to the point where, in 2008, we had what we called a nation building conference for the Palestinians, where over 600 community members from the West Bank and Gaza at the time showed up to the conference. We, even politicians from the younger generation of the moderate party in Palestine, the Fatah movement, politicians from that group showed up. We got letters and phone calls from Israel's, office of Prime Minister and President, saying that they're sorry they could not attend due to conflict. So that's how you grow influence. If you feel, oh no, I can't do this, start talking to your friends about it. Start, having conversations that meets them where they are. They don't have to know about how, my Gaiametric framework works. They have to know that, we really need to know a lot more about this that our leaders probably are not telling us. Maybe because those leaders don't know. Maybe they have a different motivation for not listening. But the idea that you start to influence the smallest circles first and move outward is the way to approach this.
Yeah. So you have invested so many time of your life and energy and emotions, for example, into the Middle East.
Yes.
What are you feeling and thinking when you see right now what is happening there?
Yeah. It saddens and depresses me to see how, as you're probably aware, Israel holds the upper hand in that whole dynamic. And although we created a superordinate vision for what the Palestinian territories could be, we really wanted them to have a goal of becoming the Hong Kong of the Middle East, which, was supported by both sides, by both the Israelis and the Palestinians. What has happened on the Israeli side, unfortunately, is the moderate left has disappeared. Those were the power. The political spectrum was a lot closer to the center in Israel when we started this. It was leaning more towards the left, and it was that's where things get done. You have to be as close as you can to the political center. That center doesn't exist anymore. You just moved completely to the right, and in part due to the help of what's happening with the global digital disruption, in part due to the voices of the settlers, the people in the red system, being much louder than they should be. And so the whole calculus moved towards, no one talks about a two-state solution anymore. I'm still in touch with my liberal friends in Israel, and they're sad. They're very sad that the nation has moved into this dark space where where they don't believe in coexisting with the Palestinians. So that's the status of that. Now, Trump and his ideas about peace, there is a slight legitimacy to that aspect, in the sense that he's approaching it from you get peace through commerce, basically. The things that have driven the world for the last 80 years or so, that, if we sign a trade agreement, that the Middle East region, including Israel, will become a superpower as far as economics is concerned. So that is definitely a carrot to dangle in front of the different fighting forces, but you're really not addressing the basis of the conflict. You're not addressing the fact that people who exist in tribal existence derive their values from looking to the past. There have been so many Palestinian people that we trained who pull a key to their ancestor home out of their pocket and they say, I'm not going to stop fighting till I get my parents' home back, my ancestral home back. Till you address that, peace is not going to be sustainable. And so, by chance, if Trump succeeds in doing this, maybe the Palestinians will be, too tired to fight. And maybe there'll be a change in the structure in Israel where the push to get rid of the Palestinians and put them somewhere else. Maybe that drive will stop as well and somehow find a solution. But based on the current dynamics, it's a very, very sad situation.
So you understand so much about development of human consciousness, yes? You know theoretically where we would have to be, yes? You have spoken with so many people. How do you manage to not get very cynically?
Well, I'm not saying I don't get how to become. I mean, I've, like so many people, like here in the States, everybody was angry and in disbelief that Donald Trump was elected to the first term. His second term was more of acceptance of reality. Talk about stages of grief. I'm at a stage where, okay, this is reality now. This has happened. The idea that, up the street from me here is one of the largest research universities in the world, University of California, San Diego. And they have just lost in excess of $300 million in research, the cutting edge research of Alzheimer's disease, of, biotech, the entire genome project and the CRISPR, what to do with it. So that became a reality for me. So what I'm rooting for now, if I believe it or not, is collapse. What I'm rooting for now is, even if Donald Trump is stopped, okay, the entire infrastructure is still in place. The Democrats are ineffective to bring us back to where we were 30 or 40 years ago. So I'm rooting for the idea now that chaos is going to, take over because this is a system that is in a zombie state. It's well financed. It has controlled all of our institutions, and it is hell bent on destruction. And the only way to get rid of that, there's no more assimilative reform, if you will. It has to become something that's a lot more coercive. It has to become something that seeks to expose its foundation that is laid on a false premise, and that infrastructure is far deeper than anything we've seen before. And so those are the challenges that. So yeah, the short answer is I'm rooting for collapse, and I'm rooting for the idea. I voted Democrat most of my whole life, and I get these messages in email. Oh, did you see what Donald Trump did today? Donate for this candidate. And my response is like, you're so incompetent and ineffective. Please stop these emails. Start looking into what the party needs to do to reclaim the rightful path towards democracy. They're not doing that. They're being reactive. And this is what red does. This is what the third stage of development does. Okay. Look at me. I'm in charge. Don't look anywhere else, because that's a distraction. Look at me. I'm beautiful. Whatever I'm doing is the right thing that you do. If you look anywhere else, I will cut your hand. If you look anywhere else, I will cut your funding. If you're a lawyer challenging me, I will put your law firm out of business. This is where we've reached. And it's going to come to a point where the narrow line between what determines institutions and what determines complete chaos and mayhem is no longer there. It's beginning to collapse piece by piece, and it's going to reach a point where it's not sustainable anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm rooting for collapse, and you know, I know that will be chaotic. I know that will be it's almost like, you know, you're dealing with pain, and someone is telling you need surgery, and you postpone that pain, say, no, it's going to get better, but the pain gets worse, but slowly, and finally realize I should be rooting for the surgery. That's where I am now, is I'm rooting for that surgery that's going to remove this cancer, and begin really the long search for what the next form of democracy is going to look like. You know, with the full awareness of the disruption that got us to where we are now, without understanding how knowledge is acquired, how knowledge is affecting the new generation that is born into the ecosystem of their right-wing parents, where they have no choice but to absorb that information. Till we understand, till we replicate what existed in the physical world before the digital world came about, we're not going to be able to preserve democracy.
Yeah. I can imagine a lot of my people, of my audience, are thinking right now, wow, I didn't want to hear this. Why is it important to see this? You know, because I see it that a lot of people, especially in green, are in a kind of denial. We still think we can manifest our dreams and everything will be fine. So why is it important at first really see the worst scenario?
Yeah. I really, I don't want people to see the worst scenario when they're not ready. They really need to, you know, Don used to say, people are not ready to evolve unless they are, till they are. So basically you have to be searching for answers. It was in my nature to search for higher answers from the time I was a child. You know, it was in my nature to say, wow, you know, Don and Elsa are doing something for the entire Middle East that I think would work, that made me abandon a lucrative career in real estate and join them. And then, you know, it's my higher view of what's going to be next after Don, after Wilbur, after, you know, after all that. So you have to have that inquiry. People who are suddenly hit by what I'm saying here as a trauma, you know, might want to examine what's stopping them from wanting to hear this. Because a lot of us are traumatized. A lot of us are not finding answers for the things that are bothering us. And so I will probably translate down from what I'm saying a little bit and say, okay, where in your life do you feel there are blockages? You know, it could be as simple as, you know, I just lost a loved one and I'm not ready to hear about the demise of all of humanity. That needs to be processed before you can move into higher inquiries. Those traumas, those small traumas have to be processed. Or not fully processed, but at least to make you functional enough that you can consider the possibility of higher problems, how to figure them out, and how to approach them.
If I'm ready to see it, to feel it, how can I, let us say, how can I transform my feelings, for example, from my feelings of grief, of sadness, but also my feelings of compassion? How can I transform this in a kind of hope, not a naive hope, you know, in a kind of constructive, okay, I see what can happen, but I will bring everything what I am and what I know at the table right now.
Fight, the answer that keeps coming back to me is advocacy. Once you are in a place where you feel comfortable with what you know, what the future is going to look like, at least some certain aspects of it, and you feel comfortable enough to talk about it, and comfortable enough to understand that many of our leaders are not merely paying enough attention to us. They're preoccupied with keeping the current economic paradigm in place than they are with actually climate change. once people begin to understand that, they resort to a different form of advocacy, one that is, not on the street accosting people or, doing demonstrations. That's great. Get as many people as you can. Get the youth. This needs to be a systemic movement. This needs to be, kids across a city, across a country, across a region, stopping going to school in the middle of the day and say, we are going to the State House. We're going to the House of Commons to make our politicians aware that unless they act, they're destroying our future. It becomes that kind of advocacy. So in a sense, it empowers the individual with the idea that they are responsible. They have a sense of responsibility towards their own future and towards the future of humanity. I mean, this is what drives me. This is what made me, write this book over an 8-year period. And, my wife passed during that time, and I put it down, and I, deepened my own understanding of what the purpose of grief is, and come back to the book and figure out that, some of the parts weren't exactly accurate. Go back and maybe deepen the perspective on how to process trauma. What aspects of depression this whole issue leads us into. Eco-psychology is a new field. Collapse psychology are new fields that people can look up online and attend free seminars. Things of that nature are we need to look at the continuity of life as a possibility, not as a guarantee. And so from that, you begin the inquisition into, okay, so what do I do to really make it a certainty? We've moved into a space where, Mother Nature is telling us, I'm going to evict you from the planet. You don't know when, because I work with my timetable, not yours. How do we respond to that? And so it's in that we find the gold on how to act, and it's unique to every individual.
Let us dream for a moment. Let us dream that we could bring together the 1,000 most powerful influencers of the world. And by magic, we could put them all in a very open state. And you could place free thoughts into their mind and into their heart.
Yeah. If they're sincere about doing something at a global scale. So this would require really a global format of operation, of cooperation, right? It's not going to happen unless the leaders of the world are equally aware of the dangers that we're facing. If they are at that state, and they want to inquire more about, okay, Saeed and other people are thinking about this issue, what leads you to think this way? And my simple answer would be, are you listening to what the scientists who are realizing the turquoise value system are telling us about climate change? Are you listening to their voices? And the voices tell us that, number one, technological solutions are not enough, that the scale of the solution needs to address the scale of the problem, meaning that it needs to be at a planetary scale. What are you as a leader willing to do to make sure that this happens at a planetary scale? What are you as a leader willing to do to avoid the idea that, every scientific concept that's created towards fighting climate change has to be scalable, has to go through the market mechanisms, has to, find investors for it to vet? No, this is, we're talking about essential survival. The governments of the world need to step in like they've never done before. I mean, we talk about global governance. This is it. This is the golden opportunity for global governance to rise. And we're not talking about one person leading the world. We're talking about a neurosphere that contains these ideas that, this is now not the Magna Carta that has driven us for the last 800-900 years. This is the Gaia Carta that's going to tell us how we survive and thrive. And so we all have to adhere to that and then take from that whatever they need to empower those scientists that are telling us we're at day 0 of understanding how the ice poles are melting. We're at day 1 in understanding complexity science. Because you can't vet a model. You can't take a model under the traditional ways of how we know science, do a paper on it, vet it in a lab, and then, have it peer reviewed and then published a year later, because a year later, what your research was changed a month after you finished your research. That's the nature of complexity. We have to begin to understand and that level of complexity is not contained within the scientific paradigms that we have now. So what do we do till we discover that paradigm? Put a freeze on things. Begin to pursue issues of degrowth. Are we all gonna, burn on the planet with, $1 million bank account? What good is that? And that really, that level of humility, that there's a higher power than our own, egos as leaders, as global leaders. That idea that there's a higher power called Gaia that will determine our destiny, and you don't have the metrics to know how she will do it. That's what's going to have to inspire those leaders and develop the humility to start addressing this in a very, coalescent way.
Yes, Said, I really want to thank you for this brave book. It really got under my skin. It's not a pleasant experience, but it's a very important experience. And I wish that a lot of people are very brave and read your book. Of course, we will put the link under this. I would like to give you the last words to our audience. Is there anything what you would like to share with our people?
Yes. The feedback I've been getting from people who have read the book or have listened to my presentations is that right away they believe that I'm a pessimist. I am really not that, and I'm sorry if I, carried forth the idea that our humanity is doomed. The whole purpose in really writing this book is to explore the ideas of whether what we're doing now are appropriate or the right things to do to address the issues at hand. And so the book is more of an invitation. I address 5 or 6 chapters in the book are designed to really uncover the ways we need to be. We need to move from this idea that we're, I call it pantometry in my book, that, everything that defines our culture are designed by the genius of our own mind to a place defined by Gaiametry, by what Mother Nature wants us to do. And so you look at what, how psychology transitions to the other side and becomes eco-psychology, how, the biology, our own bodily health becomes the health of the biosphere. All these are ways for us to begin to identify this. I didn't put them in the book just to say, this is what the science looks like. I want people to embrace what that is. And once you begin to discover that tremendous shift that needs to take place, you'll become empowered by what needs to be done. And, people have commented on the last chapter as not being optimistic. That last chapter says, if we fail to do what, I've uncovered what the scientists are telling us and what I'm saying as a response to that, and what thousands of other scientists that are not being heard are telling us. If we fail to do that, we're going to end up with what the last chapter says, that, really civilization as we know it will come to an end, and we have to start from the survivalistic, tribalistic value and build again. And by that stage, Mother Nature is not going to be cooperative with us. Many of the habitable environments that we've taken for granted won't exist anymore. So the previous half of the book says, how do we avoid getting to that place of inhabitability? And that's what I'd like people to focus on. Uh-huh. So if there's a lesson, that's it, my friend.
Thank you very, very much. Yes, I enjoyed our conversation, and I hope that a lot of people which find the bravery to read your book.
I greatly enjoyed this conversation as well.
Yes.
Thank you for the invitation, and please don't hesitate to call on me again.
Thank you.
Thank you.